In today's episode, during listener Q&A, Daniel and I kick off what will be an ongoing discussion about all things wood flooring.
And later, you'll meet Caitlyn from Restoration West.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
And this is True Tales from Old Houses, episode 101. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Stacy. Season 10. How you feeling?
Oh, so good. Yeah, episode 101. It feels really nice to just get past that threshold of 100. So now I'm like 101, 102, 103.
Here we are, a new season.
It is a new season. Now, you and I just dropped a bonus episode, like a mini-sode last week.
Just a little something extra.
A little something extra. So if you missed it, it's out there. It's not really part of this season. But before we launch into today's episode and also more information about the minisodes, I do want to say thank you to our season 10 sponsor, Scott Seidler, the Craftsman Store. He's always such a wonderful support for the show. And Sutherland Wells, they're back again. Love their products. So happy to have them back. Thank you.
Thrilled to see our friends again, the Craftsman Store in Sutherland Wells.
All right. So the announcements, let's go back to that minisode real quick. So I just wanted to, of course, make sure everybody knew that we did drop that minisode last week. It's bonus content. But the other thing, I just wanted to say that the minisodes were super popular last season.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Because of that, we're going to do more this season. I think we just dropped maybe 5. I think we put out 5 last year. We'll be doing them every other week this season. So there should be 10 regular episodes, 10 minisodes.
Yay. I have so much fun recording them, so I'm happy I'm not the only one having fun with them.
I do too. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention during announcements is that, of course, this is a new season. We're looking for some new content. And one of those things we do every October is ghost stories. We tell ghost stories.
I can't wait.
You like ghost stories a lot, don't you?
I love them. I can't.
Yeah.
I've been counting down to October.
Oh, good. Okay. So we are actually looking for people to submit their ghost story experiences and record with us. If you're out there listening and you have had an experience in your house or a house you've lived in before, something that you want to share related to the, I don't know, paranormal, ghosts, spirits, what do you call them, Daniel?
Poltergeists. I don't know.
Oh, poltergeists. All right. We're just looking for synonyms here for ghosts.
Specters.
Specters. Well, if you do have a story that you're willing to record for our October shows, then please do reach out via direct message on our social media accounts or also click on the contact link at truetalesfromOldHouses.com. We do need to record before September 25th, though, so keep that in mind. We'll be looking for your stories right away. That's all the announcements I have. Did you have any announcements? I mean, we're going to talk here quickly about what we've been up to, but do you have anything to announce, things that people need to know?
I have one. So as I continually bring up, I'm the board chair of our local land bank, and we actually just listed a house for sale. It is one of the most beautiful houses I've ever even stepped inside. It is all original. It needs a ton of work, but it is just a absolutely fabulous, Queen Anne house, all original windows, original mold. It's stunning. The address is 111111 Downs in Kingston, New York. We are working with a broker so that it's listed on MLS, but we're also asking for sort of a light version of an application so we get a sense of what prospective buyers would want to do with the building and hopefully restore it and live in it because, oh my gosh, it's just a spectacular house. If you're in the market, take a look, take a gander.
How about if we put a link to that MLS in the show notes? Would that be a good idea? Or
Sure.
Is that probably the easiest way to find it?
I think that would be great. Yeah. The house currently is boarded up just for security. So some of the pictures in the listing may be rather dark, but I have been in there many times before it was boarded. It gets beautiful light. It's just, if I weren't on the board and there was not a massive conflict of interest, I would be doing everything to try to buy this house. It's so, so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
So send the listing. We'll put it in the show notes. It'll be there for anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Project updates. I feel we talked about some of this on the minisode last week. Let's start with you.
Oh gosh, me. Okay. Well, I guess this is kind of an announcement too, but if you are a skipper of minisodes, no judgment, but you missed that Stacy and I were talking about a episode of a TV show called In with the Old on the Magnolia Network that Stacy and I both were involved in filming at Brad's lake house. So Stacy has a cameo doing window restoration. Brad and I renovated the house largely over the winter, early spring, and basically it was to meet the production schedule of the show. So that's why we were toughing it out in February and March and just like, what are we doing here? It was all for your entertainment. So the episode is episode 4 of season 4, which just started, and it is at the time that this podcast will drop. I believe it will be on streaming. I don't know what the episode is called. I haven't seen it. I just know it's 43-ish minutes of Brad and I renovating this house together.
That's great. And I don't know, I probably have like 2 minutes. That's my guess. 2 minutes of me in there.
I assume I just sort of am in the background of a lot of shots.
Nobody puts
around.
baby in the corner with you, Daniel.
Announcement/project update. And then projects I mentioned at the end of season 9. This is the summer of trying to get the cottage done, my long-suffering cottage. So it's moving along. It's not done. I was really trying to have it ready for sale by about mid-October. I'm not sure how realistic that is right now, but I'm really trying. The floors are literally getting refinished right now, which is so exciting. As soon as we're done recording, I'm going to go take a peek.
Oh, that's neat. And we're going to actually talk about that in just a few minutes, too.
Oh, right. Yeah. So yeah, that's how that's coming along. And how about you? What you working on?
I don't have a ton of project updates to share with you because I really was gone the better part of August. Went to Canada for the tour that I hosted. I made some new friends. Some people who listened to the podcast came along on that trip. We had a really good time. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that we learned or that I found interesting on that trip, if you're okay with that.
Do you mean a fun fact or two?
Well, yeah, I would call them fun facts. I find them very fun. They're definitely facts, but I don't know.
I love a fun fact. Tell me everything.
Well, I know a lot of people were like, why Canada? And my answer is, why not? Canada's amazing. Full of nice people, beautiful scenery, has a real European feel. No regrets. Loved the trip to Canada. I was interested in, and I guess on the mini-sode, I talked a lot about some of the other little things that we did. But at the end of the tour, we were in Halifax, which I'd been to before. And that's kind of when I found out about the Halifax explosion the first time around and really noticed that there's some differences in the city of Halifax. You have like Halifax, which looks really old, and then Halifax, which looks like it's from the 1920s. It's really wild to see that. It's almost like a line. And I noticed that, and I was like, why is there a line? And it's because there was an explosion and a tidal wave that actually wiped out this giant part of the city. So when I went back to Halifax, we had a step-on guide on our bus, and I thought, we are going to hear about this Halifax explosion. The missing pieces are all going to be put into place here. Well, he kind of glossed over it, which I thought was a little bit interesting. There were some things that we learned kind of in passing. He did talk about, he briefly was like the Christmas tree, Boston, there was a big explosion. So we did talk about it, but it was kind of like, oh, but that's okay. You know, everything's okay. But one of the fun facts, it's not even fun. It's just a fact that came from this Halifax.
Just, can you recap the Halifax explosion in a couple sentences? In case people don't remember, / Daniel doesn't remember.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Daniel doesn't remember. Well, it was before our time. So during World War I, 1917, they were bringing ships into the harbor, basically. Halifax is a giant harbor. And they start off this with saying that we love Germany. You know, Germany, we're allies now. Everything's cool with Germany. But at that time, everything was not cool with Germany. And they were worried about getting the U-boats, the German U-boats, blowing up things out in the ocean too close to Halifax. So they pulled ships into the harbor. And one of those ships, I used to know the names. I'm sorry. We did this on another episode. But in short, one of the boats was an old boat. It should have been decommissioned a long time ago. And it ended up exploding in the harbor. And when
Oh,
it
wow.
exploded, it destroyed homes all the way up the hill. Halifax is built on a hill. It destroyed homes. And then that explosion also caused a giant tidal wave that wiped out a bunch of other stuff. So a lot of countries sent aid, including the United States, and specifically Boston sent immediate medical supplies. They sent relief. They sent money, that kind of thing. Other countries even sent doctors, blankets, you name it. And because of that speedy response, Halifax was super appreciative. And so in the 1930s, I believe, they started this tradition of sending a giant Christmas tree to Boston every year as a thank you gift. And the tree comes from Nova Scotia. Yes. And I think I actually talked about that in the minisode as well. I don't remember.
Right. I knew about the Christmas tree. I did not know the reason for the Christmas tree. That's fascinating. Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. So then, of course, with half your city, or not a half, it's like a third of the city gone, then you have to rebuild. And that rebuilding happened. It took a little while to get their bearings, as I'm sure. And then they had to rebuild it. So you can just see the distinct difference in the architecture that was built as compared to the early or mid 1800s of something like Halifax. It's a very distinct difference in almost a straight line. But the other fact that I found out about I said he didn't talk much about it, but I'll get into that, was that something called the Canadian National Institute of the Blind was actually funded or founded during that time. And it was because so many people, if their homes weren't destroyed, they were actually blinded by the light of the explosion. Because, they could hear the explosion. And then when they looked outside to see what had happened, they were blinded by this light. Our guide was talking about school kids who actually heard something and then they all ran to the window. And fortunately, the teacher was like, no, kind of grabbed them all and made them all look away because he just had this thought that, something, I think he was trying to protect them from a further explosion, but he really ended up protecting all of their eyes from becoming blind.
That's wild.
Yeah, I thought that was wild too. So it's the Canadian National Institute of the Blind, still around. It helped rehab, basically, find residences for people who are blind, found employment, and then eventually the Canadian Free Library for the Blind merged with them. So I thought that was super interesting.
That's crazy. I don't know if I knew you could actually be blinded by the light. I guess like staring at an eclipse incorrectly or whatever, but...
Outside of the song, Blinded by the Light.
Right, exactly.
That's a real thing. You could be blinded by the light.
And Halifax knows all about it. Who knew?
Yes.
Halifax knew.
The other thing they talked about a lot was the Titanic. And I'm wondering if maybe he thought that would be more relatable for all of us because everybody knows about the Titanic, but not so many people know about the Halifax explosion. So perhaps that is why there was such a focus on the Titanic. And the reason why it was a focus, of course, in Halifax was because Halifax at the time of the sinking was the closest major seaport that had rail connections. And so it was the base for ship searching. People could come in and out and join these search parties. Usually people who had status on that boat had their bodies shipped back to where they came from. But other people, there were many people on that boat, workers, all of that. They were not given status and shipped home to their loved ones. They were actually buried in Halifax in one of 3 cemeteries in pretty much numbered graves. Most of them don't even have a name on the grave. So we spent a lot of time. We visited one of the cemeteries and heard some stories about Titanic. And our guide that day was fantastic. He knew so much and he really kept us interested.
I never really considered what happened after they got back.
No.
Managing that number of casualties. Wow.
Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to share those things with you today. I know that kind of went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I just wanted to share these things that happened on our trip and give you kind of an overview. It was just really fun. We have lots of good stories, but in particular, those kind of close a chapter of True Tales from Old Houses, since we talked about the Halifax explosion before and a little bit of the Titanic as well. All right. Well, we do need to take a break, Daniel. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Listener Q&A is up next.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Craftsman Store, another excellent resource from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Craftsman Store is your go-to place for old house tools and supplies.
Once again, Scott has taken the hassle out of tracking down those specialized old house supplies that we need and put them all in one place for us. It's a cozy little online hardware store full of books, tools, and replacement parts.
Stacy and I source window restoration supplies from the craftsman store, including diamond glazing points, which are a little difficult to find. Scott runs a top-notch small business. The customer service is an actual human, and they ship very quickly.
One more thing about those glazing points, Scott likes to rehab the glazing point drivers, and he, from time to time, has those in the craftsman store as well. Super handy. But from window restoration to plaster repair, they have everything you need to do the job like a pro. So check it out today at thecraftsmanstore.com and save 10% on your order if you use our code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island, with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
Now, unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood so it flexes and it contracts as the conditions change. That makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant from everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
We were able to sample a few of the Sutherland Wells products at the window restoration workshop that we did up at Silver Lake Institute. And I have to say, you did not warn me how good they smell, how beautiful the packaging is, and how well everything works. They're just wonderful stuff.
That smell, everybody was like, this is nice. Much better than a stinky old chemical smell.
I could definitely have like a candle or just some room spray.
I do tend to use Clarabelle's for the pre-coat, but Sutherland Wells has an entire product line for whatever you're working on right now, whether it's siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells, that's WELLES, sutherlandwells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TrueTales.
We are back.
We're back.
This segment is usually listener Q&A, and this season we're trying a little something new. I had some requests last season for more of a deep dive into floor restoration. So I thought we'd take the first few episodes of this season to maybe bring on some guests to talk about different floor refinishing products. And you and I are actually just going to kick it off today with some general information, some things that we've done in our own houses. So why don't you go ahead and start?
Oh gosh, well, the wood floors in the house that I actually live in have not been refinished since 1962. So that is on my agenda. But I have done floor refinishing and had floors refinished on many other projects, including the cottage is getting refinished as we speak. I let the guy in like an hour before we started recording. So
what finishes have you used?
I've used a few finishes. I've used water locks. I've used linseed oil. I've used water-based polyurethanes. Never used an oil-based poly. And I've used Rubio Monocoat, which you also are familiar with, I think. So I think one thing I've learned is that I don't actually like refinishing floors myself. I think it's a very hard job. And at least this is what I tell myself, that the machines that I can rent are not as good as what the professional is going to bring in. And so I find that it's just one of those things that to me personally is worth hiring out. That being said, sometimes when you hire things out, like anything else, you can't be overly picky about exactly what you want, because you often don't want to push a contractor to use a product that they're unfamiliar with or uncomfortable with. Usually they won't warranty it, first of all, and second of all, they may do a lousy job because they're not used to working with it. So I always try to find out what the contractor tends to use, prefers, and then we sort of go from there. I don't love oil-based polys because they amber over time. A lot of kind of older school refinishers will just prefer oil-based poly. It's what they've used forever, and it dries really, really hard. I think the difference between water-based polys and oil-based polys, like that gap, I think is getting smaller and smaller. So I have a lot of experience with Bona products. They make one called They change the names all the time. I think it's still called Bona Traffic HD. And Bona is a 2-part like epoxy kind of system. So you mix it up and then it's really, really easy to apply, very forgiving, dries quickly, comes in any finish you want. And so I really like that product. At the cottage, I'm doing a water-based poly in part because that's what the contractor is comfortable doing. In my own house, I think I'll probably do Rubio. What about you?
Well, I have used pretty much the same things that you have used. I've used water locks before on cabinet tops, not on the floors. I've used oil-based poly, I've used water-based poly, and then Rubio Monocoat is what I have on my downstairs floors. I'm with you on not really enjoying doing floors. I found it to be extremely taxing to sand, and I actually kind of blew out my back for a while. Like it took probably a year to recover to get back to where I was.
Oh, no.
I mean, I was doing things, but it was always like a little bit of pain.
Right. Was this in your own house, in the Blake Hill house?
This was in Blake Hill House when we did the Rubio Monocoat floors.
I didn't realize you did that yourself. Oh my gosh.
So we did the whole first floor. We did the library. The second floor isn't done, but yeah, we did that. And I told Andy, I said, we will never do this again. I will hire this out.
So real quick, what led you to choosing Rubio over more sort of normal finishes?
Well, I had somebody reach out to me about using Rubio. They had used it in their house. They really liked it. I don't think I asked the question, what would you use? I think I was just kind of throwing the information out there. And she wrote to me, and then I think we ended up talking on the phone about it. And it just sounded really like a good product for us because we were actually, and we are, still living in the house. Living in the house, we were trying to refinish the floors. The way you can do it is you can move stuff over and do part of it. And then once it's dry, you can put your stuff on the side that's been done. It's a smooth transition between one side to the other. So that really appealed to me. Plus it was one coat. You know, we weren't going to have to worry about doing a coat, letting it dry, doing another one and another one. And then the third reason was really my dog, because it was a penetrating oil sealer. I didn't have to worry about dog hair getting in the finish.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh, absolutely. Well, my dogs are basically the reason I think I'll use it here, because I know you can touch it up with more of the product if it gets scratched, which mine absolutely will. I didn't think about the other stuff, though. You're so smart.
I should say another thing, too, is that since we were going to be in the house, I believe it's no or extremely low VOCs. And so it wasn't going to be like this toxic product that we were going to have to be inhaling for days as it cured. Because if we hadn't done this, we really would have had to just sort of move out of the house for, a week. And in hindsight, I will probably never move into a house again before refinishing the floors if they need to be done. It was very clear that these floors needed to be refinished, and we just moved in anyway. I would not do that again. I wouldn't. I think it would allow for some flexibility of product. It would just make things a lot less of a headache. But I'm really happy with Rubio Monocoat. We did that, I believe, 4 years ago. I'd have to go look. I wrote a blog post about it. And it's great. Like, I haven't touched it up at all. And I'm very, very happy with it. It does have some limitations with pets. Like if your pet is alone a lot and could maybe vomit or have an accident on the floor, I think that can cause a stain sometimes.
That's true with Polly, too.
I mean, that stuff is pretty acidic, right? And it just kind of eats at any finish, whether or not. So I know a lot of floor refinishers don't like to work with it.
Right.
I'm lucky that I had somebody here in town who is actually just a friend of mine. I did the floors myself, but he had really good things to say about Rubio, and they use it a lot in their floor refinishing business. So at least I knew I had somebody to bounce that idea off. The downside for me for Rubio is probably their customer service. And the reason why I say that is because if for some reason something happens and you're not happy with the floor, whenever you call them, they'll always say it's your fault. It's not the Rubio, it's your fault. You sanded wrong, you applied it wrong. They never, ever, I've never heard somebody call them to ask questions or talk about it without them like, no, that's your fault.
That happened to us.
Did it? Okay, yeah. So you have the same thing.
Yeah, we used it at the lake house. Yeah, Brad really was I just played with the samples and then he did it. But they looked awful. And then he talked to Rubio customer service. And I think they basically said you didn't put enough on, even though the claim is essentially you can't really like underdo it. It'll just sort of take as much oil as it takes. But Anyway, he hired out, it was really smart, and not all contractors are willing to do this, but he hired out the sanding because they weren't familiar with Rubio. He knew it's what he wanted to use. So he was like, I'll do that part if I can just pay you to sand. And then they did a terrible job sanding, which then we compounded again, TV production schedule. So we just threw the finish down, and then that looked really bad. And so they ended up coming and re-sanding. And then Brad was basically, I already did this once, so you guys are going to do it the second time. And it came out very nicely. It's a nice finish. It feels good.
All right. Well, we're going to dive more into this topic as the season progresses. So again, I would like to invite people to submit their questions about floor refinishing. We need those questions by the end of September. You can submit those through the contact form on truetalesfromoldhouses.com. I'm going to have some guests. Sutherland Wells hopefully will come on, talk about tung oil. They're our sponsor, but I can think of no one better than Sutherland Wells to talk about tung oil, right? And then I hope we'll have Bob Yap back to talk about passive restoration, and then we can answer some of your questions as well.
Great. And if you have questions that are unrelated to wood flooring, that's fine too. We'd love to hear them. So please continue to submit those, and we will get to them later in the season.
Thanks. Our guest today is Caitlyn from Restoration West in Salt Lake City. Now, I actually did conduct this interview solo on my recent trip. I went out to visit Andy. Caitlyn and I got together. And this is actually part of something I've wanted to do for a while, which is basically a young tradespeople series. And I mentioned that to you before, Daniel. I said, should we do this? Because I'd really like to hear from some people who entered the trades at a very young age, maybe straight out of school. Because we've talked to a lot of people who have taken a real winding, long path to the trades. But we haven't spent as much time talking to young tradespeople. Caitlyn was wonderful, and I think you're going to enjoy this interview.
My name is Caitlyn. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the owner of Restoration West, a historic window and door restoration company based in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Thanks, Caitlyn, for being here.
Thank you.
Again.
Yes.
I do this, let's see, I should probably keep some stats now on how often I do this. But yeah, this is the second time that Caitlyn and I are talking.
We're in the shade now.
We're in the shade. I messed it up. Anyway, we'll talk about that. Daniel and I will talk about that in the mini-sode. But for today, I'm talking to Caitlyn in the park across from what you are calling the Never-Ending Project.
Yes. We will talk about that.
Yeah. So I've never recorded outside except for the first time Caitlyn and I were talking about 10 minutes ago. So you might hear cars or birds or
squirrels chirping.
Squirrels.
That aren't birds.
That aren't birds. Yes, exactly. So, all right, Caitlyn, are you originally from Salt Lake City?
No, I've been here for about 4.5 years. I moved out here for my first real job, quotes, in Park City, Utah, as the historic planner. Before that, I did a little stint in Germany. I kind of wanted to take a break after grad school. I was in Munich as an au pair, got to travel some. And then before that, I was in grad school in Muncie, Indiana at Ball State University, getting a dual master's in architecture and historic preservation. Originally, I'm from Texas. I'm from Lubbock, Texas. And I went to Texas Tech for undergrad in architecture. In the growing up time, sometime in, 8th grade, I moved with my family to Doha, Qatar in the Middle East.
Wow.
And that's kind of what really started me getting interested in architecture and the built environment.
Lots of beautiful buildings there, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of new buildings, but it's just interesting. And then, obviously got to travel some while I was there. Got to go to Malaysia, Morocco, and Germany, and London, and some places with my family. And it was just travel. I was like, got the travel bug very young. And
I have that.
Yeah.
I still have that pretty bad. Yeah. So how did the historic preservation component become interesting to you?
I say I've always been interested in things old and rusty. I remember dumpster diving with my mom, but always kind of flip furniture and do projects. I've been making things for as long as I can remember. Just, my dad's an engineer, my mom's a seamstress, and she just everything. So I've always been working with my hands, but liking working with old things, I guess. During undergrad specifically, there was a class that had some sort of curriculum in historic preservation, maybe for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know it was a thing you could do. So whenever I was looking for grad schools, I had some family in Indiana, and they kind of encouraged me to look at that program because they knew about it. And so I did some research and decided that was where I was going to go, because the dual master program was really what I was interested in. I convinced one of my grad school professors to teach a HABS, a Historic American Buildings Survey documentation class.
Oh, interesting.
Using this one-room schoolhouse that my family owns in southern Indiana.
So can you elaborate on what that class would entail? Yeah, I'm interested.
So we went out to the site, measured. There's like a very specific way you're supposed to measure for HABS documentation, notation-wise and all that stuff. So the professor taught us that. I don't remember any of it, but it's like so specific. But we did that, went out and measured, and then we did research, wrote up narrative, all that, but somehow it lasted a whole semester. I can't really remember how, but we actually ended up winning an award, the Peterson Prize, I think is what it was called.
Oh, okay.
And so it's actually listed, like we documented it, and it's on the Historic American Building Survey now.
Oh, interesting. So what would the purpose of something like that be? I think intellectually I can tell, but I'm just curious, what would be the benefit of that, or why? I can see how it would feed into a National Register nomination.
Yeah,
certainly.
That's one of my goals, is to get that all written up and submitted someday. Yeah, so HABS is just like really intricate measurements, drawings, sketches of details. Like we did the little cornice, corbels, sketched
neat.
out, and like measured all the windows, and have these very detailed drawings of stuff.
So you could actually take all that information and recreate this building another place if you wanted to.
Yeah,
or if something happened to that particular building or a historic building and you wanted to recreate it, then that would be possible. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Wow. I'm going to look more into that because I'm very interested in knowing more about that. So you have this building that's still in your family, you said, or on a family property outside of Muncie? Or?
It's a little bit more close to Cincinnati, southern Indiana and Brookville area.
I know in Missouri, you'll just be going down the road and then you'll just see a little schoolhouse in the middle of a field. Is it kind of like that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah.
There's been my family, it's all extended great aunts and uncles on my dad's side that live there. So there's houses that are built kind of next to it now. But yeah, it's kind of one of my origin interests. During grad school, I got really interested in that building just because I would go down and visit and just like be in awe of how adorable this building is. And the family that owns it, my great aunts, are all teachers. So it kind of means a lot to the family. And there's actually I remember there's a little mark, one of the USGS like elevation markers is on the building.
Oh, neat.
But yeah, I remember during grad school, it's like, oh man, these windows. So that's kind of one of the reasons I guess I really got interested in historic preservation trades and stuff.
That's neat. Do you have any pictures of that building?
I do.
Yes. Would you be willing to share one on the show notes for the podcast?
Yes.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, they're HABS level photographs.
Yeah, definitely. That would be so good. So now you've moved over into the trades, and I'm super curious about why.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a heart for the trade, so it's not a question for me like why I like the trade, but I'm always curious when somebody comes in, especially from a deeply academic level like you are.
Yeah.
What was the draw for the trades?
Yeah.
And they're not so different. I guess I shouldn't draw a line so clearly between trades and academics because that's kind of what we're trying to blur at this point. But I guess I'm just, the way you would spend your workday is very different. So I guess I'm saying that sensitively enough because that's how I mean it.
Yeah, no, I understand.
In my head, that's how I hear it.
It's so funny. So last year there was a Window Preservation Alliance conference in Maine, and I had been following these people online for a while and really got to go meet all my celebrities at this conference. And it was just like, I think I might have been the youngest person there, 29. So it's not really that young, but like, it was just fun.
Young.
It is young. And that was part of it is like, I have the world ahead of me. I don't know. But everyone I talked to there, they were like, what do you do? And, I'm an architect and I'm working on my license. I'm working on my architecture license and I kind of do windows and I'm interested in windows. And they're like, well, that's not going to last very long.
How did they mean? What did they mean by that?
Of like, I think they were trying to tell me it's really hard to do this part-time because I realize you're never going to finish anything.
I see.
And unless you find people like Never Ending Project House, which they deserve to have their windows finished, it just takes so much time to do the work. And I really was just getting drawn back and forth and never having a day off. Well, first of all, I'm a workaholic. I like literally can't not be working. I'm like, that is my personality, is doing things. So either working on my house or whatever, or training my dog or like doing stuff. But with the architecture firm, I still work on projects with them. And the projects I've been working on for the 2 years kind of were all shifting to this point of being starting construction. So it kind of felt like I could take a step back because construction administration phase is a little bit less hands-on because you've given it to the contractor. Yeah. So you're there to advise and submit permits and addendums and whatever, but you're not like full-time trying to design and get a building drawing set out. So it kind of felt like a good timing in sense of, well, I had enough projects lined up that I could do it financially. I'm losing my health insurance tomorrow, actually. Like, things like that. It's just like, but the leap. But it was like, I couldn't find a reason not to. I had support from my architecture firm to do it because they were like, yeah, we'd love to still have you work on these projects. I still want to finish those projects and finish my license eventually.
Sure.
I still have thousands of, well, actually, I'm pretty closer now, but I have tests to take to get that license. But and I had a lot of friends in the preservation field here at Preservation Utah, our state nonprofit, and our SHPO here. They were, windows, we need more windows. And I'm like, I know. So they just kind of like were lovingly poking me to do it. And
pushing you in this direction.
And I think last year at the conference, I kept telling myself, once I could feasibly make it happen financially, it's not going to be such a terrifying leap. I was like, once I have work scheduled out enough that I can see the numbers and not feel so scared.
Right.
So it all kind of just lined up perfectly.
And here you are.
Yeah. Full-time windows for about a month.
So would you say that you're one of the very few people in the state of Utah or maybe the Quad State area? What do we call it?
Yeah, the West.
The West.
Yes. I think, working in Park City, there's obviously contractors up there that have been working on old homes for longer than I've been alive. So they know a lot, but they don't do what I call true preservation because it's not required up there. And again, they're fighting the kind of developer-heavy battles that are
Park City
part of, just Utah in general.
Right.
But they're great. They do really great work. And there's some contractors in Salt Lake, maybe. Yeah, there's a couple that focus on old houses. I've talked to a couple of them, and one, they do window work if it's part of a larger project, but they're not going to specialize in it, right? Which makes sense financially. I understand.
Yeah, super labor intensive, that window restoration.
Yeah, you have to be there. And there's one company that's been around for a long time, and they have kind of phased themselves out. I'll say, I met the owner through this bid project. It was on the Utah Public Procurement. Actually, someone found my contact somewhere and emailed me, inviting me to go bid it. And it's this massive, 60-something double-hung windows and storms that they wanted done in a month and a half. Because it's a federal housing project, and there's all that regulation. And anyways, I met the owner of that company there, and I was all of the kind of puzzle pieces laid back together. I was like, it makes sense that he's kind of a curmudgeon, doesn't really care about preservation. And there is something to... It has to make sense. The business has to keep running. Right. So I understand. Right. And I do believe that they own a lot of old shapers and things to make new sash from.
Oh, cool.
But they don't really do restoration. They will make new wood windows, and they do a lot of storm windows, which is fine. So that's kind of the only company out here.
So do you see yourself traveling to other states out west to do this work, or do you feel like there's enough here in the Salt Lake area? I mean, we both know there's enough here in the Salt Lake Valley, but will they pay for it? Will they want it to happen? It's a very different mindset here than it is out east where I live. Mm-hmm. I don't take my life out there for granted. I've lived in enough places in the United States that I can see the difference. But I was just curious, do you feel like there's enough... the possibility of advocating enough that it will become
Possibly.
a good choice here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had requests from people in California, which is
Sure.
interesting. There's a couple companies out there. The Window Preservation Alliance directory is a really good place to look.
I send people there all the time.
Yeah, literally, it's like, go there. But I actually got a request the other day from the city of Boise.
Oh, wow.
Wondering if they could put me on a list of contractors, I guess.
Yeah.
And if I'd ever be interested in going out there. I'm like, man, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why not?
Boise's great.
Travel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll get a bigger van and go travel around some places while I'm young, I guess. As long as my dog can come with me.
Yes,
like,
definitely.
Yeah, sure, I'll go.
Right. Have dog will travel.
Right. Have window will travel. Yes.
So to kind of dovetail this back towards where we started, you were talking about the never-ending project house that you're working on right now. And why do you call it that? I'm curious.
So it was the first big restoration project that I got contacted about. The first one was just a sort of mechanical makeover project, which I am indeed still working on. Some of the houses out here have a lot of windows.
Yeah. And for people who are not familiar with mechanical makeover, that's really just fresh ropes, making sure the window functions
Getting the
up
window
and down.
unpainted shut is a big part of that.
Sure. Usable. Basically making it usable, not necessarily going through all the nuts and bolts of rehabbing or restoration.
And sometimes that's all it needs because they've been maintained, they've had paint when needed and all that. So the Never Ending Project House, they called me the day this grant that Preservation Utah had
open. Day. You got the
day it was due.
Oh, no.
Not even a day before, the day it was due. So I had never put together a restoration project scope before. Theoretically, I've done some restoration work before, but I hadn't really known that number of hours and what it took to do the work. And honestly, this house is probably one that had it had just gone way too long with deferred maintenance and I understand why. It's a lot and don't know where to start, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe these owners didn't want to mess up and make the wrong choice. And we are in a historic district, so they wouldn't have necessarily gotten approval to replace them. Maybe there's always,
but thankfully
reasons,
not.
Right? And I don't think they didn't want to.
So how close did you get with your bid? You don't have to talk money, but I mean, do you feel like you did pretty well?
I feel like all in, if I wanted to take into account all of the sills we're replacing and fixing and the sash, some of them needed to be completely rebuilt. I'd say it should have cost double what I charged.
Right. Oops.
But it's also taking double as long as it could have if I was doing it full time last year. And luckily these owners are so kind and patient.
And you have to learn some way, right?
Yes. Again, that was another thing is I had someone to kind of take the leap with me.
Right.
Blindly,
Yeah, that's nice.
And I feel very thankful for these people for I did a bunch of work last summer on it and then went to the Window Preservation Alliance conference in October and came back and it had snowed. And it was a big snow year here.
Yeah, for sure.
The most we've had in a long time. So I couldn't really work. And then I was out for a couple of months for a major surgery at the beginning of the year. And then time just flies but I kept accruing more projects, scheduling out and so
you keep coming back to this one.
I do. Again, these people are very patient and I think they understand the starting point was way more. I was just starry-eyed when I went to go do that quote of wow, I can actually work on someone's house. This is cool with all original windows. And it was.
So how are you going to feel? Yeah. How are you going to feel when that's done?
It's going to be, I might give myself a tattoo of the diamond encasements.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
I did all these.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, it'll be really great when it's done. But yeah, these people are so beyond patient with me. And it's good to work with people that see the value in it.
Yeah. So you just started this business venture for the most part, but I'm going to ask you to sort of picture what you want from this.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to get into more full-scale historic remodeling stuff. There's a handful of contractors that do that. They're all aging to retirement soon. And I feel like that could be fun to do. I feel like if I could find projects that were windows and working on doing historically accurate kitchens and, going, maybe doing some more restoration work, bringing something back to what it was, which is a thing now people are doing, right? Someone painted the pink tile and we want to go back to, things like that. I think that would be really fun to do. I definitely think I'll have enough work to keep myself busy for a long time with just focusing on windows and maybe doors one day.
Right.
You're out there. But
if you're out there,
I want to work on a door.
Caitlyn wants to work on your door. If you are somewhere near Salt Lake City.
Right. Yes.
So do you think there'd be a market for workshops here?
Yeah. So I've done a couple. So Preservation Utah does a conference every year. And last year I co-taught a workshop. I will say there's a friend, mentor, he went to Snow College, which used to be...
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah.
In St. George.
Right. It's closed down for a long time now, but he went there. And so he's not a full-time restorer by any means, but he is doing his own house in southern Utah and knows a lot of stuff about log cabins and whatnot. But we kind of co-taught a workshop last year. And then this year's conference was just more of a presentation, hands-on demonstration. I was showing Abitron, how that works, and kind of we just did like a PowerPoint type thing. And then we're teaching a workshop together at, like I said, the CCC building up in Big Cottonwood Canyon that's hosted by, it's a co-thing with the State Historic Preservation Office and the Forest Service.
Oh, that's so great.
To teach some of their state employees how to do window work, because there's a lot up there that are now almost 100 years old that need to be worked on. So that's going to be really fun. But there's a lot of workshops. And then I taught another one in June this year with Preservation Utah up in the Avenues neighborhood. And it was just a day-long, kind of quick workshop thing with some homeowners. If someone wants to learn how to do their own windows, I'll go spend a couple of days with you and show you how to do it. And that'd be really fun to do.
Does your own house have windows to do?
So I bought my first house about 2 years ago. It's in the Avenues. I didn't think I would ever be able to live in that neighborhood, but this house, I literally say it was waiting for me. I'm sure people feel this.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one that has that thought, but I was totally happy going to go live out in Rose Park area where there's a bit more affordable, quote unquote, houses out there. Younger people like me are all, buying houses out there and working on them. But this house was on the market for 2-3 months even by the time I saw it. And it's this fun little it was actually built as a barber shop.
Oh, wow.
Next to what was a butcher shop building. So they're both kind of storefront looking commercial buildings, and they're right on the sidewalk. So my house doesn't have anything original in it besides some plaster. Some of the casing might be original on the inside, but it's so mismatched and weird. But I've been restoring it, carpeting, all the flooring. My flooring's just that fun tongue and groove right on top of the joists. So no subfloor, that whole thing, crawl space. But the kitchen is my kind of pride and joy on that. But no, there's no windows. The windows I have are 2 sort of old storefront windows on the front that I don't know what they would have looked like. The only picture I have is from the 70s.
Interesting. So why do you feel like this house was meant for you?
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things of I had been looking at the listing online for a while. I was like, well, this is probably haunted, but sure. And went and saw it with my realtor, and my sister was with me at that point. It was the 3rd house we saw that day. And I was we walked in, I was like, okay, sold. It was so weird.
Yeah,
and you just so much work, but it was in fine shape. And I kind of know how to look at buildings and diagnose them, but I wanted to have all the inspections done anyways. So with radon, that's the thing here, mold, all of the stuff. And they all kept coming back okay. The only thing that needed to be done was the roof, which I'm actually finally getting a new roof next week using the state tax credits, actually.
Excellent.
Which is great. But it's just one of those things of I walked in, we walked around. It's pretty small. It's a 4. People ask me how many bedrooms it is. I say it's no bedrooms because every single room is a walk-through hallway because there's 2 doors. Because it was a storefront barbershop at the front, and then the residence was the other side. But I have plans sort of in the works drawn up to do an addition back there to add on, have some more a real bedroom maybe. Because right now I'm just in the little enclosed porch.
Well, you sound like the right person. You have architecture background, historic preservation, you know how to do windows. You are on your way. You're ready for this.
Yeah, and I'd love to actually work on the addition myself too, and
that'd be great.
Hire out things that have to be hired out, but learn how to do some, really get more hands-on experience maybe with my own house and the windows. One day I'll rebuild some new wood windows and some storms for those openings because there's only 2. So I'm it'll be totally fine. Yeah.
You got this, Caitlyn. All right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me in the park, taking time away from your project to do this twice. Oh boy, doesn't matter how many times I've done this podcasting thing, I still make epic mistakes
That's
here
okay.
and there.
That's life.
All right. Well, thank you. And yeah, if you've got a picture, any
Of
pictures
the
that you want to
schoolhouse.
share,
Yeah,
the
sure.
schoolhouse would love that. So
Sounds fun. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thanks again, Caitlyn.
Great job on that interview, Stacy. I'm sorry I couldn't join you, but I'm really excited about this theme of talking to young folk. We could have Gen Z on the show representing.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you so much to our guest today, Caitlyn.
To continue the conversation, join us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses and Blake Hill House. Or you can follow us individually on Instagram at Blake Hill House and at Daniel Cantor.
And to learn more about everything we discussed in today's episode or request a transcript, go on over to truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
See you on the mini.